if you'll notice, one of the filters that are built into the advanced search tool is actually groups. You can select specific groups or all groups. But what that will do is if you layer on the other filters that are built into the advanced search tool, you'll be able to build that custom list, and you can actually focus on the people that are easiest to email through the LinkedIn groups. You probably can't see it because it's pretty cloudy down here, but there's a URL. And sometimes, like I mentioned, with premium accounts, you can only see 700 results. And a lot of times, your results are going to have more than 700. And so a way to get around that is there's a variable built into the URL, which is the distance. And the minimum that the standard system provides with you is 10 miles, which means you can see all the results within 10 miles. If that produces 200 results, you can reduce that to 1 or 5 miles, which enables you to dive down a little bit deeper and then spread out geographically, if that makes sense. So hopefully, if that doesn't make sense, you can ask me in the Q&A, or we can jump into that. But essentially, the URL has a variable which enables you to dive down a little bit deeper into the geographic areas if you adjust that if you need to. So, another function that I love about LinkedIn is the word of mouth feature. I've found that if you ever want to get anything done, you have to do it yourself. And so LinkedIn enables you to spread word of mouth for others. And what I mean by that is when we have folks RSVP for our events, we can actually dive into their connections, put them in a spreadsheet, and determine which of those connections would actually be a good fit for the event. Then when we message them to invite them for the event, we can reference our friend who would be going to the event and use that as an endorsement for that same event, and then continue the chain as they start to RSVP. And so what you're doing is you're telling others connections because they're visible to you about this person going to an event, but you don't have to rely on them to contact every single one of their connections and message that. And so this is a great method to spread word of mouth without actually having to rely on others to do so. Also, when you are messaging people, LinkedIn, just like most social media platforms, is going to give you a lot of information about the individual. That's going to make it much more, I guess you could say, higher ROI on the response rate for these events. And so the common connections is probably one of the biggest ones as far as something you can reference in the message that you're sending to the person to help build a bridge in that message. There's also common LinkedIn groups, birthdays, schools that they've gone to. You can find quite a few different variables in their profile. These are just a few examples, but if you were able to pull this information together, you can obviously utilize this in the messaging that you send out through LinkedIn to make it a much warmer connection because you have that information and want to use it. In addition, there are other forums and groups within LinkedIn, and there's a tool which is Google Alerts. I use this, but what it does is it enables you to track things that are happening on LinkedIn that you would want to know about. So without Google Alerts, you'd have to spend all day looking over groups and watching things, and if you were to do that, you probably wouldn't have a job after a week. So you can let Google Alerts do the job for you, but Google Alerts doesn't dive deep enough into LinkedIn, and so you have to train it to actually know to go to LinkedIn. And that's what that site, linkedin.com/answers represents. And so these are two examples of groups that are public information, so Google Alerts can pick up this information. But what happens is if you put the keywords, so let's say you're focusing on medical folks, so anything that triggers a certain keyword in the answers section, which is like an open Q&A forum, or any LinkedIn groups that you're in, you can track all of those for yourself, and then as soon as that comes in, you'll have a real-time feed from LinkedIn into your inbox that'll allow you to engage in that conversation. And this is really nice because you can put permanent stamps all over LinkedIn without actually having to spend the time to find them. You can rely on Google to research this for you and help you grow your presence. So something else to keep in mind, a lot of you are probably thinking, well, do people actually respond to LinkedIn messages? You'll probably notice up until now that it's a little bit time intensive to actually reach out to all these people, especially if you're in large numbers. But the reason why the conversion rate with LinkedIn is so high is because you can't automate the emails from LinkedIn. So when people receive those types of messages, they know that they were not from an automated system and they're more personalized. Plus, this conversion rate represents response rate, but it could be a lot higher if you're able to utilize the different variables and bridge connectors that you have available through LinkedIn. So, with that, I'd like to open up for Q&A, just to help, so that way you guys can make sense of all the jargon I had.
Can you go back to the Google Alerts and talk about that?
Sure. Do you have any specific questions about it, just how it works?
Basically how it works again.
Sure. Google Alerts, so just go to google.com/alerts. The way it works is you will plug in certain URLs from LinkedIn and tell it to track that page or that section of LinkedIn. And so where it says keyword, you have to have a keyword there. You can't just track the page. But what that does is, if you want to focus on anything medical, you would put in certain medical terms. You can do one generic one, or you can do lots of different ones. And what it will do is it'll track that page in a real-time fashion, and then send you an email to the link of the page every time something is mentioned like that. Does that make sense?
Justin, we
Yes.
have a question that came in over the mobile app. The first one is, how did you get to the search filter page?
Oh, I forgot to mention that. So yeah, the search filter is found in the advanced button. It's on every page on LinkedIn. But if you hit advanced in the top right hand corner, you'll find that tool.
And there's another question that came in over the mobile app, which is, how have you addressed the sensitivity of using your staff's personal accounts to manage organizational tactics? Have there been good incentives to have staff engage at a higher level?
So is the question basically how to use staff, as far as staff using LinkedIn basically, and how to deal with that?
Addressing the sensitivity of using the staff.
We have our entire company utilizing LinkedIn, everyone from the secretary to our programmers, just because we want to get everyone involved. And so typically the way we work it is we send out an email to everyone. We have to make sure that they understand what we're doing so that they can get involved and help us in our efforts. And so some people have opted not to do it. And I think most people are willing to do so just because they understand the value that comes from it. And so as far as the sensitivity behind that, I think most people understand the value of getting involved and working with the company and helping the company. But if somebody doesn't want to deal with it or not want to be involved, we give them that choice and not force anyone to get involved in that.
Do you incentivize them at all?
We don't have any type of incentives. We do help them in terms of we'll optimize their profile. We'll help them build their connections to people that they know, and make sure that everything is set up correctly. So that's one of the incentives that we provide. Most of our employees are incentivized by the willingness to be part of the company and help the company. And so that's one of the biggest incentives that they find in being involved in our LinkedIn programs.
Are there any other questions?
Justin, Brian Van Amel for a conference company in New York. Learned a few new tactics today, so thanks for sharing those. We've done some of the things up there that you mentioned, such as the group messaging. And I've noticed on occasion when using some of our team members' accounts to do that outreach, that we went above certain thresholds that LinkedIn set as far as page views. And in certain instances, those accounts were suspended or put on hold. But I know if you had similar experiences in using LinkedIn, if you kind of have any guidance on what thresholds that we should stick to.
It's a great question. So the typical threshold on a daily basis is 2,000 clicks. And so that LinkedIn doesn't have an automated system counting the number of clicks that you're doing. It's not based on a time frame, but it's more just on a, basically just, if you do 2,000 clicks in 10 minutes or 24 hours, it doesn't matter. But you do need to keep that in mind, that LinkedIn is obviously trying to maintain the quality and trying to avoid spam and certain robotic systems. And so 2,000 is around the threshold. I try to stay around 1,500 and try to, and that's why we try to involve all of our employees, because we know that there are those limitations. And so you do need to space it out correctly. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a brief follow-up question.
Sure.
Because I've been contacted by third parties who do this kind of outreach on your behalf through your accounts, a lot of them based overseas. Have you had any experience working with any third-party vendors that do that?
You know, I've never worked with any third-party vendors because I just don't feel comfortable with handing LinkedIn information over to somebody else, even though it's probably fine. But I found that interns are really great for that, because if you have that spreadsheet, you can have the message all customized and be able to set it up. But typically, I try to keep that in-house because of the sensitivity behind it. So, any other questions?
Speaking on that level, I've actually been contacted by some of those companies, and they have, during the demo, they actually show the way that they're able to capture straight from LinkedIn. They actually have an app that they built that they can just literally throw out Excel spreadsheets on the clock. Have you seen anything like that? It's like $3,500 a year. It's not, and it's unlimited.
Yeah, there have been applications over time that extract information from LinkedIn. The problem with those is, like he had mentioned, LinkedIn is usually able to detect that pretty easily. You won't get your account canceled from something like that, but it will become flagged. And usually they don't have a very long-term success rate. And so they may be able to do a handful of options, but they don't work in the long run.
One more question. If, for smaller companies, are the companies paying for the LinkedIn Premium upgrades, or are the employees?
Yeah, it depends on if the company is using the LinkedIn system for their benefit, then typically they pay for it. If the members are using it for, if it's like a sales team and they need to do it to find their own deals and something they want to do on their own, they would pay for it. But if it's a company initiative, typically the company is paying for it.
I have a question. Can you give an example of an event, a B2B event that you actually use this for? Kind of like a little mini case study?
Sure. We do about 4 to 5 events a month right now. We're gearing up to do a few hundred next year because of the success rate that we've had. But for all of the events that we have, we use this system. And ever since we started using it, our suppliers have been amazed by the fact that they're now talking to people that they never knew about. So we have a model where we have local support people for all of our different companies in the technology space that support the local partners in the market. And they think they know everybody, but then when they go to our events, they find that there's 10 times as many people as they used to come to the events. And there's also all kinds of new people that they've never met before. And so what's nice about this is a lot of people are just like, how did you know to find me, or how did you know about me, or it's just it's had a great effect because we found that traditional marketing outlets just haven't been able to really penetrate everybody, especially in shifting markets and the way people switch jobs these days. People's lists tend to deteriorate pretty quickly. And so we found that LinkedIn is so much more powerful because it's so up to date and always finding people that were never part of anybody else's marketing list before.
When you talk about lists and reaching out to people, are you sending emails or you're sending mails through LinkedIn? Like,
Typically,
what is more successful?
the emails for LinkedIn are much more successful. And typically you're going to do that through the LinkedIn groups because that's the easiest medium to reach as many people as possible. And so the LinkedIn groups is going to allow you to send an email directly through LinkedIn. What's nice is that it's very personalized because they know that somebody had to actually write that. There's no automated LinkedIn email system. But also it shows up in two inboxes, the regular inbox, but also the LinkedIn inbox. And so you kind of have a little bit higher return rate because of those factors.
Another thing too is you avoid spam filters as well.
Yeah.
Because they register.
Because, yeah, these are strangers a lot of times if you're doing prospecting. And there's another thing why LinkedIn is so much more powerful, because you don't have to worry about spam. Because people that join the LinkedIn groups basically opt into the email system through that. And so any email that's sent through there is totally legit.
Can you share your results or statistics doing paid advertising on LinkedIn to promote B2B events?
I don't have any statistics for that. I've actually never done paid advertising, just because we've been able to use these methods and not have to rely on the advertising for that, just because we can build our prospect list, we know who we want to contact, and we have the means to do so.
You referenced in one of your examples identifying a person who responded to attend an event and then reaching out to that person's contacts to let them know.
Yeah.
Is that permission-based, or if it's not permission-based marketing,
So,
what
yeah.
are the implications for privacy?
That is permission-based, and not everyone has their connections exposed to everybody, so most people don't take the time to, like, most people have -1 connections like our friend Nicholas does. They don't actually take the time to go in and hide their connections. And so it is permission-based, but a majority of the people on LinkedIn do not hide their connections to you. So that's a good question.
We have another question that came in over the mobile app, which is in B2B markets where individual connections may not be as valuable, what's the best way to grow your company's LinkedIn network as a whole?
The best way to do that is actually, let's see if I can find it. Is the signal system. And so this signal system is going to enable you to reach out to your network, which you may or may not be connected with yet, and it'll enable you to engage with people, and those engagements and conversations that you're able to strike up are the moments when you can start connecting with people. And so this is the perfect opportunity, because you can strike up a conversation. This is where you probably want to start building a network, because typically the people that you're connected to within your own market are also connected to the people that you want to work with. And so this is where I would recommend building relationships.
And we have another one. What's your opinion on accepting connections from people you don't know? Should you use LinkedIn to build your network?
That's a great question. So it's along the same lines, and so there's always the question of when should I connect and when shouldn't I connect? Should I connect with somebody that works at a company that I work with, even though I don't know them? Should I connect with just about anybody? The truth is, most people recommend that you try to connect with people that you have some type of acquaintance with, because in some of these examples it makes sense to be able to leverage those connections and reference those connections in the marketing that you're doing. In other senses, though, it does make sense to broaden your visibility as much as possible. And so for the most part, you don't want to accept anybody, but if your initiatives for marketing are a little bit different, where you're just trying to do research, it would make sense to open up your network to just about anybody. Any other questions?
Is there any way to know when someone was added to your LinkedIn contacts?
Yes, and you'll receive an email notification when you are connected, when someone does accept an invitation.
No, I mean back in time.
Yeah.
You've got 16 zillion connections.
Yes. So the way you can tell who you're connected to today is there's a connection section,
Right.
and you can actually export that into an Excel
Right,
spreadsheet.
but you don't know when you connected.
Oh, when? There is a history funnel in terms of in in your LinkedIn inbox that has a history of when you received that connection. And you can also look it up in your inbox, in your email. If you're a pack rat, you should have all of those emails in there from when that took place. So that's a good reference points for that. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Do you find that LinkedIn is being embraced by younger generation of students coming out of college?
Did everyone hear that?
Can you repeat that? I'm just wondering if you've seen trending patterns of the younger generation embracing LinkedIn as a way to network. Like some recruiting events of our clients, we're talking to some young people, they don't believe in LinkedIn just because it's foreign to Facebook, it's different. They prefer Facebook.
So is the question is, do you feel like it's more like a younger generation within the LinkedIn network?
Yeah, so are they actively on LinkedIn?
Yeah, definitely the younger generations are on there. I had a hard time not finding people on there. And it also, for me, it's not so much the age, but it's more of the industry. So the more business to business and the more upscale in terms of the individual, not in terms of, more like in terms of executives and things of that nature. It's the higher up the pay scale you go, the more likely they're on LinkedIn, is the way I've seen it. And so it's not so much a gender, or not so much an age deal, but it's more of a, what's your job? Any other questions?
If that's it, in about 5 minutes, we will have coffee and refreshments in the hall. And then after the break, we have the technology demos. And there are 4 to choose from each session, so there'll be 2 per room. You go in, they're 20-minute sessions. There are 4. If you have any questions, look at this, see me or look at the sun. Justin, I'd like to thank you for filling us in on LinkedIn.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you.